So you might be wondering what these three gentlemen have in common. We'll start with Julian. What brought you together?
I guess autism and a nonprofit that I founded called KultureCity. I have an 8-year-old son that was diagnosed with autism about 4 years ago. And 2 years ago, my wife and I decided to start something called KultureCity, which is a nonprofit that really impacts how businesses can really grow through social good and also impact families with autism. And that's kind of why we're sitting here today.
And Mick, how did you meet Julian? And maybe if you can tell the audience your personal story with autism.
Sure. Tiki and I go way back. We go back to 2000 with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and the largest event of the year, they do a muscle team.
Yep.
And we would have a muscle buddy, different child with muscular dystrophy. And so we saw each other every year at MDA events for probably about 12 or 13 years. So when Julian told me Tiki was on board, I was like, yeah,
Okay, cool.
So, Tiki's my buddy. I became, I wrote a little article called The Accidental Advocate. I was doing a special for WWE Network, and I wanted my son Mickey, who's on the spectrum, to turn a drum roll into a drum solo. Like, I'm pretty sure it's been done somewhere before, but I thought it would be a fun way to get him involved in the show. I had no intention of talking about his autism. And then when he walked on stage, I just said, in case anyone wonders why I've been wearing this band for the last year and a half, I wear it for my son Mickey, who's on the autism spectrum. And the next morning I woke up to find out that I had become an accidental advocate. And Julian reached out to me, told me about the work that he was doing with KultureCity. He knew that I was involved with a couple of other really great organizations, and asked me if I wanted to kind of bring some of that energy to KultureCity.
And Tiki, you're on the board of this organization, and what's your link to autism?
Yeah, I don't have a son or a daughter with autism, but I was asked by Julian to come host his culture ball a couple of years ago, and it coincided with really a brother, my best friend's son, being diagnosed with autism. And I think anyone who has a kid with autism or has friends that has a kid with autism, you kind of don't know what to do, right? You want to be there, you want to support, you want to give anything that you can, but you really don't know what to do. And for me, it became a way to do something for Chris, who still lives in Roanoke, Virginia, where we grew up, and the resources aren't great. And so meeting Julian was a huge opportunity for me to pass forward knowledge and experience, how to address his son. And if you've ever met Julian, and you have now, John, and I'm sure others will in this room, he and his wife, Michelle, are unbelievable people, and I just can't say no. So when he asked me to come back the next year, I said, okay, great. When Michelle asked me to run the Boston Marathon that raised $21,000 for Lifebox, I said, of course, let's go do it. And so I've gotten more and more involved, and we're continuing to innovate in this space, and it's exciting.
It's kind of interesting, this kind of social good and social growth and social branding. I mean, we were talking briefly earlier about nonprofits, and you consider them, and Tiki as well, dinosaurs.
Yes.
Wait, you consider Tiki to be a dinosaur?
Oh yeah, well, I am. I work for a
You
newspaper.
just ran the marathon.
But I mean, you're talking about nonprofits being dinosaurs. Can you maybe explain how that and social media might be changing that equation and its effectiveness?
Yeah, I think nonprofits do great work, but I think especially with the last couple of years, we've seen such a big rise in social entrepreneurship. And I think that's really because of the fact that nonprofits as a field have not really reinvented themselves. The model has been consistently the same. You basically throw a big event, a gala, and you raise enough money to basically support all your initiatives through the year. Or, and you're also kind of pigeonholed by your mission statement where you don't really innovate the services you're providing to the families that you serve. So when we started KultureCity, we felt that there was a significant potential for that. What we could do, number one, is that we could innovate the products and the services we provided to families. And that basically helped us create a pipeline of social good products. We could also partner up with, different celebrities and companies, not really a one-off occurrence, but really just delve into what a partnership looks like, where it's mutually beneficial, and not just a spot, appearance or here and there. And that's kind of how we grew our relationships with, Mick and Tiki. And I think that's the vital thing. And then the third and final thing is really just figuring out different sources of revenue streams rather than just throwing one big extravagant gala. Let's figure out how we can engage not only the population we serve, but our donor base and grow different revenue streams based on that.
When you were talking about earlier about how you use Facebook and Twitter. I know you do a lot of nonprofit work, but I'm also wondering how you just use those, especially you guys, how you use that social media to reach out or communicate with people. I mean, how it's affected the way you communicated, and then I'm going to ask you about kind of where you came from and the field
You want to
you were
address
in.
it first?
Yeah, so social media wasn't around really when I was playing, so I didn't benefit from having millions of followers because I played for the New York Giants. But I think that's where the world is going. It's how we want to interact with our celebrities and those who we have an affinity for. And those who are smart, they understand the branding in that, and they understand that if I have a cause that's meaningful to me, I can really show people that I'm deeper than whatever I put out on the playing field. And so as a now retired NFL player and a sports broadcaster, I see that, right? More fans, I think, interact with me on social media during my radio show than pick up the phone and call me during my radio show. And that's just the nature of the world we live in now. But it's a great opportunity. When we do things like run a marathon or have Culture Ball or talk about LifeBox, which is a life-saving kit that for kids with autism who wander, it prevents them from getting in dangerous situations. When we mention it, people respond, and that's because it feels real, it feels personal. I think that's the value and the strength of social media as it pertains to celebrity reaching out to the public.
Okay.
And in my case, for those who don't know or can't tell, I'm a really low-tech guy living in a very high-tech world.
How many Twitter followers do you have, by the way?
I've got 1.5 million. And even I think 5 years ago, I started working with a group called RAIN, which is the largest anti-sexual assault organization in the U.S. I started working with them in 2008, and they asked me 5 or 6 years ago, back when I had about 60,000 followers, if I might want to start a campaign just called 10 for RAIN. And it was sexual assault. It's a difficult subject to get people talking about because unlike a lot of nonprofits, you don't really have a gala, that no one really wears a wristband and no one holds a golf tournament. That sexual violence was always seen as something you kind of get through and try to leave behind you. And so we're trying to find a way to connect with people. And I just happened to say, like during my little PSA that we recorded at home, hey, we're looking for $10 donations. And if you put in enough money, I'll mow your lawn. And I sent it out, and Rain got back to me and said, will you really mow lawns? And I said, yeah, if the price is right. And so we set that price pretty high, and we got 4 or 5 people who paid considerable money for me to travel their homes and mow their lawn. It was $5,000 for a personal Foley lawn cutting. But what it did was it made the subject just palatable enough to be covered by media groups. Like there's no way TMZ would do a fun story about sexual assault campaign. And so we've now taken that. Every year we've tried to do something, and we've done it with and I'm going to tie it into what hopefully we can do with KultureCity. But we found that this is our 5th year. We just finished our campaign, and in 5 years we've raised almost $600,000. This last year we raised $143,000, and people ask me about it, and they say, well, what was your advertising campaign? I said, 0. Like, what was your overhead? I said 0. Like, it was 100.
That kind of ties back into
it ties back to the idea of
exactly
dinosaur. But
overhead.
even when I was a little down that first year, because I didn't think percentage-wise that people were coming through, I was like, I thought people loved me. Why aren't the numbers there? And I started hearing from survivors, and they were saying, don't worry about the money. You are creating awareness. People are talking about this in ways they never would. And in the same way, Tiki raised $21,000 to running the marathon, but the awareness it raised was amazing. And I was told, like, the feedback that you received from parents was just, it's so heartwarming. I put out the little article called The Accidental Advocate. And generally speaking, when it comes to social media, I build up that wrestling base, and then I sneak something socially significant in there. I have to be really careful that I don't overdo it.
WWE does that, though, right?
They do a pretty good job.
They do a lot of things behind the scenes that we don't really hear about.
But just through experience, I've usually found that when something of social significance hits Facebook, it kind of Facebook's algorithm kicks in, sees it's not getting much of a response, and it slowly fades away. And in this case, you know, it received 14,000 likes and was seen by 750,000 people. And the comments, again, so many of them from parents of autistic children, they just warm your heart. They're just, thank you for being out there, thank you for caring. So we're still trying to figure out how we can, you know, work together to help each other. But the very least I can do is raise awareness and let other autism parents know that they are not alone, and they appreciate that.
You know, I was going to ask you, you had some interesting comments, both of you, as very high-profile people use Facebook versus Twitter use. Because as a reporter, I used to think that Twitter was the best way to reach people and get feedback. Now I'm finding out it's just the opposite. How about you?
Well, what do you think?
They're two different animals of the same breed type. Whenever there's breaking news, I go to Twitter. But I feel like if I want to write something deep and meaningful, you go to Facebook, because I feel like I'm talking to my friends as opposed to talking to people who I don't know, who may be friendly, but I don't know. And so it's just a different feel. And I use both, but Facebook is where I tend to gravitate.
And as a broadcaster,
for
do you use Twitter for the news, but for Facebook to communicate?
Yeah, as a broadcaster, we get so much interaction on Twitter because, well, say we're talking about, I don't know, A-Rod hurt his oblique and whatever the story may be. People want to hit us real quickly and say, "Oh, you're an idiot for saying that." Oh, that's
kind of a
I agree with
reactionary
you.
response, yeah.
But if you're doing something more meaningful, like rank the best Yankees of all time, Facebook gets much greater feedback. So it's a nuance depending on what the topic is.
Yeah, I think people are a little meaner on Twitter. There are people who actually have screenshots showing themselves being blocked, and that's it seems to be the goal. And because you don't have to have an actual profile, you know, people take their Facebook profile a little more seriously, and so their comments actually can have consequences. And we found that, like, when it comes to like trying to get somebody engaged in something, that Twitter people tend to be window shoppers. They'll look, but they won't buy. And that people on Facebook will take a little bit more of an investment. They're willing to read an article. It's a little more substantial. And when it comes to you know, supporting a good cause, or even you know, buying an autographed sock every November, they're a little more dedicated.
Julian, I want to ask you about KultureCity because it's interesting. What does that name mean? And number two, I think you're based in Birmingham.
Correct.
Why Birmingham?
All right.
Just interesting choice.
Yeah, so the name KultureCity came about because, you know, when you look at children with special needs and autism in particular, you know, I have an 8-year-old boy who's nonverbal, and my background is an emergency medicine physician, and I have a normal 5-year-old boy. And we were in a grocery store one day, and a lady told us, said, you know, your son with autism, he can always be a grocery bagger at Walmart, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that's the bar. If he becomes a grocery bagger at Walmart, the world will tell me I've done a phenomenal job as a dad. But if my typical son becomes a grocery bagger at Walmart, the world will tell me, wow, you failed as a dad. And I think that's where the culture needs to change. And that's why the name KultureCity come about. We need to look at these children and understand that they have fundamental potential and capabilities. And we as a society really needs to figure out how to engage them and create jobs for them. And I think that's the biggest thing. And then to answer your second question, Birmingham, Alabama is kind of where we live. And we always found it really cool that if you could break out and kind of growth hack the nonprofit process from Alabama, we can do it anyway. Yeah.
And
Good.
To tell you a little bit about Julian's level of commitment, he and I met in Baltimore. And I had a show I was doing there, like some stories from my career, in which we met for dinner. And I said, okay, good, I hope you enjoy the show. And he goes, I can't make the show. I have to catch a flight. And I said, oh, were you in town for business? And he said, no, I was in town to meet you. I said, you flew to Baltimore just to meet me? And so he thought I had something to offer. And really, he'll stop at nothing to do what he thinks is best for this organization.
How did you meet him, Tiki? Because it's really funny. Well, it's not funny, but it's really interesting to see the interaction between you because you all have that common bond, and it kind of draws you close together, and you genuinely really like each other. It's not like some.
So it's interesting. I have a company called Thuzio, which is a marketplace that allows athletes to book with companies, organizations, et cetera. It's shifted into the digital marketing space and things of that matter. Well, Julian reached out through my company because he thought I'd be interested in hearing what he had to say. And it really just came down to a conversation. And I get these calls all the time, right? Hey, would you come be involved with this? Would you come be involved with this? And for some reason, I just said, all right, Julian, let's get on the phone call.
Yeah.
And we ended up, what I thought was going to be a 5-minute conversation, we talked for an hour and a half.
Correct.
And before you knew it, I'm all in. When's the gala? Oh, it's in Birmingham, Alabama? You're gonna give me barbecue and Southern hospitality? Count me in. So I came down, went to the event, and it was, Mick was talking earlier about the families that were there, and just hearing their stories and these kids who have overcome, autism in a way, and I'm looking, I'm like, God, you're smarter than me. You're more accomplished than me, and you're 17 years old. And after that, my wife came down the next year. We were fully in, and like I said, we couldn't say no to Julian and Michelle, and we joined the board very soon afterwards. And now we're constantly thinking of different ways to grow the message. So Michelle and I ran the Boston Marathon a couple of weekends ago, and it was fantastic. I love being in shape. I love running, and it, post-mortem, like, oh, that sucked. Heartbreak Hill was terrible. How could I do this better? How could I do this better? How can we do this for kids? And it precipitated us coming up with, well, let's start something like KultureCity Fit, right? For families or for kids with autism who need to exercise and how to engage them in different ways. And Julian's ability to innovate and think and grow his message allows those type of things to happen. And it's exciting for me, right? Because I'm a part of something kind of at the ground floor. KultureCity is a startup at the ground floor
it's a
as
startup.
we grow,
it's a nonprofit startup.
as we start to grow and build a movement and a new culture for kids with autism.
I was going to ask you, are there very many non-profit startups, or is this a whole new category? I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of any. I think we might be the first, hopefully.
And if you probably, I'm wondering, in the nonprofits that you work with, maybe you bring some of what KultureCity's doing to those to make them more efficient or to reach more people or to draw more revenue.
Yeah.
Possibility.
Well, it's more of a symbiotic relationship.
Okay.
Right. Sometimes philanthropy feels like give and take. You give me this, I'll give you that. You know, as opposed to what's right for everyone involved. And that's what makes KultureCity special to me. It's why I continue to be involved, and every day I'm thinking of how can I do something new and unique and beneficial to everyone in the culture.
Yeah. I mean,
Can I address a sensitive subject here? I thought we were going to be at a podium. I didn't think people would know that I was wearing sweatpants.
I like your socks.
And green and red striped socks.
Those are fantastic.
So I apologize. This look seemed like a winning combination. Yesterday.
Christmas is in 8 months, Mick. 8 months till Christmas.
that's right.
Wait, have you spoken at tech? You have. You were here last year, but
Yes.
have you? Do you guys speak at tech shows, or is this something new for you?
I was in Collision in Ireland earlier, which was
very
great.
nice.
Enormous, but it was fantastic.
No.
I was still going into the crowd after pay-per-view matches, using the payphone to call home and let my wife know that I was okay. Like,
Oh my God.
in the late 90s, when everyone else had a cell phone.
The
They
fall
say,
from the
"Why-
steel cage
why-"
wasn't actually that bad.
That one was that bad. But I remember even in 2006 at WrestleMania, like wandering out there and like calling my wife up. So I'm like the least technical guy you could think of. So no, this is my first time at a tech show, but I'm hoping that what it shows, even the little bit of technology that I've learned through social media and learned, when to send posts out on Facebook and how to like squeeze important messages into a wrestling post so that more people will see them. And if I see a post that's taking off, I'll go to that edit button and I'll put a hashtag and I'll put a little something out there so that I can get a message out there. So I'm learning as I go, but hopefully it shows that just a wee bit of knowledge carry you a long way.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, there's a huge sports influence here among the speakers and the topics. And I think Lee Steinberg's going to be talking later about advances in technology, not just in marketing, but in equipment. I was going to ask you, Tiki, about that with all the talk about concussions, the movie, the book that it was based from, or the article actually was based from.
Yeah.
Do you find that heartening, or, I mean?
I think it's the world. We use technology to solve problems, interconnectivity problems. That's what Facebook solved, and Twitter, and email, if you want to go back that far. When you look at the physical challenges facing professional athletes, technology will find the solution. Now, will it ultimately fix it? I don't know. I think the NFL has an existential problem, to be perfectly honest with you. If so many people continue to die prematurely from damage that they did playing the game. It's actually not dissimilar to what happens with wrestlers or those in the military.
Exactly. That's actually a very good parallel,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of the same injuries that were between the two.
We have the advantage we can fundamentally change rules, you know, without hurting what we do, and it's far more difficult. But I think you're kind of working hand in hand. I don't know if you knew that the co-founder of the Boston Center for Traumatic Encephalopathy was a professional wrestler. So
Chris,
he's probably the greatest ex-wrestler of them all,
Right.
just for the contributions he's made in the field of, you know, in CTE.
Yeah, I'm wondering, if just going back, one last question about the NFL. If you think if they had improved the equipment or the turf or what have you, the rules, do you think you would have played longer, or will you just leave anyway?
Sport's about passion, and when you lose your passion, really to prepare, you can't do it anymore. I was ready to move on to the next thing. The interesting thing, though, about technology, to get back to the helmets, new helmets and new shoulder pads, we tell athletes, and again, a lot of football players are PE majors, being coached by PE majors type of thing. You tell them this helmet is going to protect you, right? You have nothing to fear. It actually makes you hit harder, right? Which causes more concussions. So there's a counterproductive, counterintuitive result from technology sometimes. That's the real issue that the NFL faces.
Wow.
Yeah.
One last thing. What's next for Culture City? What do you want to do? We got about a minute.
Yeah, I think what we want to do is really start focusing on job creation, especially for kids who are nonverbal and who kids are considered to be on the lower end of the spectrum. You know, Silicon Valley is doing a great job in engaging the kids who are more higher functioning. I think what we need to do is make sure that the kids who are nonverbal are not left out in the shuffle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for being up here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.